Now we're going to set up Redux. Redux will help us create a global state. We need a global state for certain things, such as getting the user information and most importantly the user token. So whenever the auth state changes, that will the Firebase user, that will give us the user and its token. So that information we will put in the Redux, so we can easily access that information from anywhere, from any component, any pages in our application. All right, so let's go to the editor. Let's open the terminal. We need to install some packages. Okay, so npm install Redux react-redux and then Redux and dev tools -extension. All right, so we need Redux, we need React Redux. This will work as a connector that connects between React and Redux, and then a Redux dev tools extension will help us have the Redux this extension in the Chrome browser, so that we can easily keep track of this state. All right, so let's hit enter. While that's happening, you can also go to Google Chrome Store and install that extension for Redux. I'm using Brave. Maybe I will switch to Chrome. Okay, let me pause the video. I'll be back. So I have switched my browser, and you should go to if you don't have the Redux installed, you can see here I already have installed. That will look something like this. We don't have any state at the moment, but it will look like that. So if you don't have that, you can always go to Google Chrome extensions, go to the Chrome Web Store and search for Redux. Redux dev tools. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, so make sure to add to the Google Chrome. I already have, so you can see I have a remove from Chrome button, but if you don't have, you can install that. And you can also install React from the Chrome extension as well. Okay, so that will also let you inspect the React components. All right, let's go back to the editor. Okay, that has been installed. Let me start it again with npm start. Okay, so we got the application here. Let's go to app, and here let's import Redux. So import create store from Redux. We also need to import provider from React Redux. Import provider from React Redux, and we're going to import that dev tools as well. Import compose with dev tools. Make sure you don't have any typos, right? So make sure the camel case are there. From Redux dev tools extension. Okay, so that's perfect. Now actually we should do it in the index.js, not app.js. Sorry, let's cut this out. Whatever we wrote just now, let's cut it out. We're going to import it in the top level here in the index. All right, now we can create a store. So let's put it in a variable store equals to, use the method create store, and each store need a reducer. So reducer is basically a function that will update the state. All right, so you will see how it works. If you're new to Redux, you will see it's not that complicated. So to create a store, we need a root reducer function, which we will create very soon. We will put in a separate folder. All right, so let me just write down for now, root reducer, and then we just use the compose with dev tools as second argument, and we execute it. Okay, so that's our store. Now once we have the store, we can provide that store to our application so that our application, any components, any pages can access the Redux store. And for that we have the provider, right? So that's what we're going to use here. So React DOM.render, let's just put it right here, provider, and the entire code, the browser router, and then app, just put inside. Okay, so basically we just wrapped everything in the provider. Okay, so everything is perfect. The only thing left to do is create the root reducer. Okay, so let's do that. So right here, this is the index.js. That's where we are at the moment. Now let's create one folder in the source, and let's call it reducers. Alright, so inside reducers we create index.js, and here we're going to create that root reducer, because this application will have more than one reducer. The first one we're going to create is going to be for managing users, updating the user, so we can call that user reducer, but later we might add some more. So we're going to have multiple reducers. So there is a method that comes with Redux that will help us combine these multiple reducers into one, and that one reducer we can call that root reducer, which is the one we have to pass to the store to create the store. All right, so to create this root reducer, here in the index we can combine all the reducers. Okay, so let's try here. First let's import combine reducer, that's function combine reducers from Redux. All right, and then we can basically export const root reducer equals to, using the combined reducers, we can combine as many reducers as we like. At the moment we'll just start with one. We can call that user, and that's going to be user reducer. Simple as that. So that means we need the user reducer. So instead of writing everything here, let's put it in a separate file as well, and then we can import. So import user reducer from, let's create in the same directory here, user reducer. All right, so it's pretty straightforward. All we have done here in the index.js is we imported these Redux packages that will help us create Redux store, and then we just wrap our entire component with the provider. All right, so this root reducer is here, we are exporting. That means we need to import that. So let's import that. Import root reducer. Actually this is not destructured, this is a default export. You can see, oh, actually we export like that. We can do default export. We're not going to have more than one reducer here, so export default root reducer. All right, now import root reducer from, so we need to go once inside reducers folder, and because it is called index.js, any file that calls index.js, you can just leave it like so. You don't have to say index. Okay, that works by default. All right, so we got the root reducer. Great. This is basically combining all the reducer. At the moment we have only one, and we haven't even created this one. That means we need to create this one, right? So we are already importing. Only thing left is to create. So let's create that. User reducer.js. So here we're going to use a switch statement to update this state. All right, so export function user reducer. I guess so it will take the argument state. We can leave it as null, and then it will get action. We're going to use switch case. So switch action dot type. So we will be sending different type of action types from our functions. For example, in the login page, when a user complete register page, when user finish the registration, we get the user name and user token, right? So we can do something like logged in user. So that is going to be our action. That is going to be the action type, the name, whatever you like to call it. Okay, so that's going to be the type. And when we get a certain type, what do we want to do? We might want to populate the state, the Redux state, right? So that's how it's going to work. So we're going to switch the action type. Now inside switch we use case and we use string. Okay, so make sure it is a string and not variable like so. All right, so case logged in user. So if we send this action type by the name of logged in user, then what do we want to do? What do we want this function to do? Okay, so what we want is we want this function to update the state with whatever we are passing in. So this is the type. When we give something, we give the type and we give the payload. So that's the type. Then the payload we can access from the action. Return action dot payload. All right, so that's the case. If we get the action type logged in user and whatever payload we get, so this payload will contain the user information, for example user name, user email, user token, whatever that is, that will be a return from this switch case and will be available in the state. So in the beginning the state will have null, no user. Once we dispatch this action with this type and with this payload, that will be available in the state. Okay, so if it is your first time with Redux and you find it difficult, just follow along in the next lecture. When we implement this, it's going to be much clearer to you, I think. All right, so let's continue. Case logged in user. Let's create another case as well. Case string, let's call it logout. So on the logout, we're going to also return action dot payload. Okay, so when we want to log out the user, maybe we will send the action payloads like user equals to user will be null, you know, just something like that. So there is no value in the state. All right, so we got two actions. We also want to have a default case. So by default, return state. Okay, so that's our user reducer. So basically we can use these two action types with whatever payload we send, and that will update the Redux state. This is it. Let's come down here. Cannot read property get state components provider Redux. Okay, so what happened is here in the index we have created the store, but we're not actually using it. We have to pass the store to the provider. All right, so store. Okay, so this way we can pass the Redux store using the provider component to the entire application, so that it is accessible to the entire app. Okay, so here you can see it's back to normal. All right, let's inspect. Now if you have the Redux DevTools installed, you can see this tab here. You can even click here, and here we have the Redux state. Now you can click here in this state and you can see user by default it's null at the moment. Okay, so this is great. We have Redux setup here. That null is coming from here. This is the default value we give to the state. If we would give something like email something token equals to 123, if we would give something like that by default, then you could see that here. All right, so obviously we don't want to do that, but what we want to do is we want to get the currently logged in user from Firebase and based on the authentication state of that user, we want to populate the Redux state so that we can easily access the user information and user token throughout the application. So that's what we're going to work on in the next lecture. And there's one more thing before I finish this lecture. I have to use the function, the regular function. You can also use the arrow function here if you want to, right? So export const variable, give this a name. Its value is going to be a function, arrow function. Okay, so you can do that as well. Okay, cool.